one of the more interesting things about Whatnot is that like the buyer behavior is super unique, and people come back and buy at a much more frequent clip than they do definitely in person and like normal brick and mortar stores, but also in e-commerce. On Whatnot, the buyer retention it's 80% month over month. So 80% of the buyers who buy today are buying tomorrow. And I truly believe it's because of that element of just hyper personalization and really building around communities versus anything else.
Welcome to Retail Remix. After years of industry enthusiasm but lackluster consumer uptake, one company looks like it's finally bringing America's live shopping dream to life. On Whatnot, the static add-to-cart experience of the last 20 years is being replaced by something more immersive, more immediate, and much more human. The platform cleared $8 billion in GMV via live sales in 2025, double what it did in 2024. And the average user is spending nearly 2 hours a day tuned in. Today, we're talking with the company's VP of Categories and Expansion, Armand Wilson, to find out how Whatnot has finally convinced American consumers that live shopping is something they want and need. Welcome back to Retail Remix. As always, I'm your host, Nicole Silberstein, Editor-in-Chief at Retail Touchpoints. And today we are joined by Armand Wilson, VP of Categories and Expansion at the live shopping platform Whatnot. Armand, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Nicole. I'm stoked to be here.
So now, I don't know if you were at the NRF show earlier this year, but your company was name-checked pretty prominently on the big stage by Gary Vaynerchuk. Were you there?
I wasn't there, but I think some folks from the team were.
You've heard about it? Okay, so for the others of you who weren't there or at least weren't in that session, Gary asked everybody in the room if they had heard of Whatnot. And when not many people raised their hand, he basically then chastised this audience of hundreds of retail executives for not knowing about the company and what you all are doing. So, I don't want to chastise anyone, but for those who aren't familiar with Whatnot, give us a rundown of what the platform does and also the really impressive growth trajectory that you've been on.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, Gary is a character. We love him.
Yeah.
He's been yelling for anyone who will listen about live shopping for a couple of years now. I think he loves being early on these things, and he goes live a bunch and sells himself on Whatnot, which is cool. But yeah, Whatnot is, as you mentioned, is a live shopping app. We're the largest live shopping app in North America and Europe. We've been around for around 6 years. And what is live shopping? Like, what would you see when you opened up Whatnot? Generally, you'd open it up and you'd see people selling anything from Pokemon cards to luxury handbags to vintage t-shirts to cooking equipment. It's pretty diverse today. But essentially, you see a bunch of small businesses going live and selling product and kind of telling the stories behind products, and a really strong community behind them, engaging and kind of chatting about the things that they like most about those products.
Mm-hmm. And it's presented kind of like a social feed where you can scroll through these videos.
Yeah, exactly. We have a very highly customized and tailored algorithm. So once you think on the app and kind of pick some of your interests, we'll tailor that feed to the things that are most interesting to you. And you can go in and based on how you engage, we'll try to bring more relevant streams and more relevant sellers to your feed.
So the live shopping market in North America and Europe is estimated to be around $22 billion. You've already captured a large chunk of that, but it's still kind of just a drop in the bucket compared to the $1 trillion live shopping represents in China. So I'm curious where you would say the US is now on the live shopping adoption curve. Is there still a cultural click that needs to happen for Western audiences?
Yeah. I think the natural comparison, is what you see in China. And China's been doing live shopping for quite some time now, so they have a bit of a head start. But I actually think what you're seeing happening in the US and particularly on platforms like Whatnot is quite different. And so maybe just taking just one beat to tell you a little bit about how we started, because I think it's helpful
Yeah.
context is, I think the natural kind of view from the outside is that Whatnot and platforms like us looked at China and tried to copy and paste what was happening over there and bringing it to the US market. But really Whatnot was, when we first started, we weren't even a live shopping platform. We've been around for a little over 6 years now. And the original product was more of a classic two-sided marketplace, and Whatnot sat in the middle. And really what we were trying to do is build the platform around trust. And so we started just one category. We were selling these little toys called Funko Pops. Most of our founders were avid collectors. And so they were really just trying to solve the pain point that they had, which was They go online, they buy Funko Pops, other collectibles, and they get a bunch of like fake products, or the experience was like wasn't overly great on the buying side. And so Whatnot started, and it was really the idea was Nicole sells a Funko Pop, Armand buys it, Whatnot sits in the middle, you ship it to Whatnot, they authenticate that it's real, and then they send it to me. And so it was really just trying to like fix that one singular problem for a very specific community. The interesting thing was that we kind of saw some of our biggest sellers, really just one of our biggest sellers, like going live on social platforms, selling Funko Pops in kind of a really manual way. And so, they were going live. People were kind of like bidding and saying buying and selling stuff in the comment section itself because there's no integrated shopping experience. I think it was on Instagram Live. And then you would handle all the payments and transactions and the shipping outside of the platform. And so I think our founders were just really excited by the experience itself and just felt really fun and engaging to go and buy these things and really see what you were buying. And so it took a bet that could be really big. The story is, Logan, our co-founder, locked himself in his room for a couple of weeks and came out the other side. And then Grant, our other co-founder, did the first live stream and sold, I think, a couple dozen Funko Pops in that first live stream. And that was like kind of like off to the races. And so, long story of kind of telling you, like, the reason I say it is like, we really started with like one focus, which was to solve a really specific problem for a specific community. And I think if you fast forward to Whatnot today, where we're in hundreds of categories, a bunch of different countries, and we're still kind of doing the exact same thing, just at a bigger scale. And so we're still trying to solve very, very specific community needs. Now the scale has just gotten quite big. And so when I think about like China's kind of arc, I think what is being sold in China and how they're selling it is quite different than the model that's happening here. But we've always just taken the approach of being very like community first. And we started from that really like narrow focus. We're now starting to see like a very big mainstream impact. And I think what you're starting to see is, we've been one of the fastest growing marketplaces in the US for the last couple of years. We did over $8 billion in sales last year, as I mentioned. And so now the scale is quite big. And I think people are really starting to take notice. And I think 2026 is probably the year where live shopping becomes a lot more mainstream.
Okay, I mean, because as long as I've been covering this space, there's been commentary looking at China saying this is so big, it's going to absolutely become big in the US.
Yeah.
And it never seems to happen. And you say that what you're doing on Whatnot is really different from how it's being done in China. So what are some of those differences? And I mean, what have you zeroed in on to really make this so appealing to Western audiences? Because it's been kind of a tough nut to crack over here.
Yeah. I mean, I think when, I went to China and saw some of like the live sellers there, and it's like super impressive. Well, when you see just the scale of things, but a lot of what it is like taking a creator or an influencer and kind of like giving them a bunch of different products and giving them maybe some cue cards on what those products are, and the brands and everyone are fulfilling it directly. But it's a lot of products that you can buy on the brand's websites, like, or anywhere else, and it's not super differentiated. And so I think what's a bit unique about Whatnot is like the products you see on Whatnot are generally like very unique. It's very rare to see a lot of like single SKU items being sold. That does happen, but generally what you're seeing is like this like kind of beautiful combination of both community and personalization that has allowed our platform to really take off. And so the difference is like a seller on Whatnot is going live. They're selling things. They're really experts in the field. The best ones are. They're giving you like full context on the product that you're purchasing. It's kind of taking a lot of like the best experiences of you shopping in person, going to a brick and mortar store, talking to a sales associate, them like guiding you through this purchasing experience, and really bringing that online so you can do that from the comfort of your home and connect you with even better supply than you may have in your hometown. And so our sellers, they're experts in what they do. It's super personalized. I've been buying a lot of vintage t-shirts on Whatnot. And like when I go into some of the sellers I frequently buy from, they are like so in tap to the geeking out and nerding out about over t-shirts. And they'll tell you, this is single stitch versus double stitch. The tag is different. This makes it more unique than this other type of tag that was printed, that more of these shirts are printed on. And so they're kind of giving you the story behind those products. And then you start to build a relationship with them and they know you. And so, I hop into a stream and from a seller I buy from, and they'll be like, hey, I actually have this shirt that's in your size and it's a boxing t-shirt. I know you buy a lot of boxing t-shirts. Like, are you interested in it? And
they'll be talking to you directly in the live stream?
Yeah, it's super common to be like, I enter a stream and I say, oh, what's up, Armand? Like, hey, I have this thing for you. And there's a lot of like repeat. One of the most interesting things about, at least I find one of the more interesting things about Whatnot is that like the buyer behavior is super unique, and people come back and buy at a much more frequent clip than they do definitely in person and like normal brick and mortar stores, but also in e-commerce. And so I think traditionally the stats I've seen is that good retention, or like average retention for an e-commerce store is that if someone buys something from you today, in a year, 30% of those people will buy something the next year, right? Like 30% annual retention is like average. If you're killing it and doing well, it gets closer to like 60% retention, maybe 70% if you're like world class. On Whatnot, the buyer retention it's 80% month over
Wow.
month. So 80% of the buyers who buy today are buying tomorrow. And I truly believe it's because of that element of just hyper personalization and really building around communities versus anything else.
So it sounds like the sellers themselves are one of the big differentiators then on Whatnot. So tell us a little bit about who these people are. What kinds of people or companies are selling on the platform today, and what are your biggest categories?
Yeah, our biggest categories are some of the categories we've been in from the earliest days. And so trading cards, like sports cards and Pokemon cards are some of our first categories we launched into. And those are our biggest. I think women's fashion is our third biggest. Women's fashion and beauty are both categories that are really fast growing. Some of our fastest growing categories on the platform. Beauty grew about 800% year over year. And so it's really cool to see just like the demo and the different categories and communities that are finding value and Whatnot really continue to change every single year. And so right now it's pretty much anyone can open up the app and find something that they're interested in, which is definitely not the case, 5 years ago when I first started at Whatnot. It was very specific to a very specific demo.
Yeah.
And yeah, our sellers are super diverse as well and kind of like mirror that. And so like a seller who sells in comics, could look very differently than a seller who sells luxury handbags. And so it's pretty diverse these days.
Would you say, though, that most of your sellers are more like business people? So like merchants, people who run stores or are really or selling on other platforms, as opposed to like creators and influencers who are selling other people's products?
One of the things is that you have to sell your own products. Like you have to fulfill the products that you're shipping
Right.
out.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of creators that are getting value in Whatnot from like niche creators. There's a creator called Pac-Man who's a sports card influencer, and he has a huge YouTube following, and he took that following and started in like more of like a marketing relationship with us. And now he's like building a business selling sports cards on Whatnot and doing really well. That's like very specific to a niche. But then there's folks like everyone from like Logan Paul is now selling. He's been selling the last 2 weeks. He's gone live and he's selling Pokemon cards. He's super in it. And then there's, I'm in Europe right now with our European team, and there's French fashion influencers who have been really loving Whatnot. They started by just doing closet clear outs and selling things in their closets, to now they're like going live from like boutique brands and helping those brands like find new audiences. And so
wow,
it's a lot of the creators, but most of the way, like that's definitely not like the average. The average is, I would call them like everything. I want to say small businesses, but like some of these businesses have
like
gotten
business people.
quite big. Definitely business people. I think like what it takes to be a great seller on Whatnot are like the obvious things, which are like you have to be like engaging and entertaining. You have to have like really good context and like about your product that you're selling. You have to be really informed. I think most people would understand that. But like the third component, which is maybe the most important, is you have to be like a really strong operator. You have to be able to like ship and scale a business. And so, there's a lot of folks that started out with us and they were a one-person show. They were just selling whatever they were selling. They were selling sports cards like on nights and weekends. Then they were able to like build a business big enough where they were able to go full time and sell themselves. And now some of those sellers have hundreds of employees and they're selling hundreds of millions of dollars of sports cards themselves. Their parents work for them. They employ their like family members. And it's like being able to ship out 1,000 sports cards a week is like a really hard, especially as you have multiple streams going, different cards, and it's like getting those like to do well is challenging. So I think the third and maybe most important thing is like being really good like operator.
Yeah. You also have your own sneaker brand, Artifact. So are you a seller on Whatnot?
Yeah. I mean, Artifact is the success of Whatnot has definitely hindered the growth of Artifact. Is all my nights and weekends I used to spend on Artifact are now fully spent on Whatnot. But me and my partner, we still sell a bunch of Whatnot, honestly. And so we've done everything from like dropping like a new colorway, a new silhouette on Whatnot, to one of the fun things we used to do is we used to do these like splatter painted sneakers, and we would sell them just generally like you'd splatter paint 50 pairs of shoes and then you post them and they'd sell online. Whereas what was cool was like you'd be able to go live on Whatnot and be like, all right, Nicole, you bought the pair of shoes. These are the colors we have. What do you want? And you like really customize them live. And so that's where I was trying to get to, is something like the personalization that you get live that you can't get. It's really hard to get on a static product page.
Maybe eventually both Whatnot and Artifact will grow together, you know?
It would. If we had the time, I think we could have been like one of the early brands and really taken advantage of it. But the team has keep me pretty busy here.
Yeah, because you also entered food and beverage in March too, right? That sounds like an interesting category to me on a platform like this.
100%. It's like one of the ones that's still one of the categories I'm most excited by. I'll caveat by saying it's like super early days, and we have like a lot of things to like figure out to make that experience really, really great. But yeah, you can see a world where, people are selling. Actually, you don't even have to see a world. I'll just tell you some of the things that people are selling today.
Please.
People are selling like tomahawk steaks, or like people are selling lobster that you see them catch it and then you get shipped to you the next day.
Wow.
And so these are all brand new categories for us. So again, I just caveated by like, it's early days and we need to like continue to build a great experience for both buyers and sellers in those communities. But there's a world in the future where you could be like, I want to buy like a new red wine for tonight or for my friend. This is what they like. They like these couple of things. Guide me through the purchasing experience to help me do something that may be daunting. I don't know. When I go to like a wine shop, it can feel daunting at times. So like, let me go and like buy from someone who's like super friendly and will like help you guide that experience. And so I think there's so many use cases with live.
That is really cool. So now in your 2026 live selling report, you mentioned that the demand on the platform is growing 50% faster than the supply. So what categories do you most need sellers to enter right now?
Yeah, I mean, even in our most mature categories, like there's a ton of room for growth. And so pretty much any category, if you sell any of the things on Whatnot today, I think you can really build like a meaningful business off the back of it. And so everything, I mean, from the biggest categories, like the trading card type categories that we started and launched into categories like beauty that are really fast growing. Like there's a ton of room for growth in all of those categories. And so we'll take anyone who like really wants to build a great business and build a great buying experience for their customers. Like we are very aligned, and I still think there's a lot of room for growth no matter what category you pop into.
You mentioned earlier the algorithm that is kind of curating the experience for users. Traditional e-commerce is driven by SEO and keywords, but Whatnot, the content on Whatnot is really centered on storytelling. So how do you train an algorithm to recommend content based on personality per se, rather than the product?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's like a pretty big differentiator for us today. It's an area that we invest deeply in. Our product team is pretty exceptional. And so this is kind of the magic of like, you do all the hard work of getting a bunch of sellers on the platform, you do all the hard work of getting a bunch of buyers on the platform. How do you have that like magical connection to get the right people in the right room at like the right time when that product is like up for sale? And so, yeah, I think traditional e-commerce, it's very product driven. Whereas like a lot of social platforms are much more engagement driven. What are you tapping in? What are you engaging with? What are you commenting on? Where maybe traditional e-commerce is more like, I am going to find this specific product, so I'm going to this website very much with this in mind. And so I think Whatnot kind of like bleeds that together, like a bit of the best of both worlds. And so every single intent or motion that you do on the app can be tracked, and then we can then take the context from that and try to build a better experience for you. And so if you enter a stream and you're watching it and you're super into it and you're commenting, there could be something about that seller that is really interesting to you and unique to you and speaks to you, but maybe you're not purchasing those products. Whereas you go into another stream and you are actively buying a lot of those products. And so we can take a lot of the social cues when you're in a stream and you're maybe not purchasing, but you're super engaged, as well as take a lot of the purchasing intent that we see when you are actually bidding on an item or buying an item, and figure out where those things mix. So maybe it's like, you like this type of product, but this type of seller. How do we like find the magical stream that's perfect for you?
Mm-hmm. What do you do for like first time users though? Like how are you surfacing content when you don't have those signals yet on a user?
Yeah, so when you onboard on Whatnot, there's like a form or kind of like an onboarding experience that you'll click through that will help guide you through like the kind of initial view that you get. And so it could say, here are the categories you're interested in, and then we'll serve up a bunch of sellers that we think that you may like based on like the answers that you fill out, and then we get smarter over time as you use the app more.
Okay, very interesting. Now, you started in collectibles where things like authentication and buyer protection are really important. But just because live shopping is still relatively new to a lot of American consumers, how are you continuing that kind of trust building exercise for first time buyers so that they feel just as confident spent buying something like wine or lobster on Whatnot as they do on, say, well, not that you can buy lobster on Amazon, but shopping there as they do on Amazon, given that it's a newer platform?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of what makes Live amazing is some of that transparency and that trust that you get just inherently with the format. And so if you can see an item that you're buying and you can ask questions about it, and, if I'm buying that vintage t-shirt and I ask them to zoom in on maybe like a little hole in the t-shirt, or ask them questions about where it was made and see the tag, some things that could be hidden on like a static product image, you just get a lot more context just through the experience itself. And so that is what I'd say, like, first and foremost, is like, that's one of the huge value props of Live. And I would say, like, I told you a bit of the origin story, but like that trust and authenticity is truly like the foundation of Whatnot and Sings True today. And so if you look at a lot of the policies we've rolled out, how we onboard sellers in certain categories that may require like extra expertise or authentication, we have like different flows for that. And so an example of that would be like, we have like a buyer protection policy, right? Which ensures that if something does go wrong, like, we have you covered and we'll get customers like the right thing that they ask for. In categories like luxury handbags and accessories, sellers require additional approval. And we've also partnered with companies like Entropy or Real Authentication to help like bring down some of the pre-authentication costs for our sellers, and will ultimately build more trust in the platform.
Okay. So, but you're not actually doing it for some of these things like collectibles, high-end goods. You're not doing the authentication yourself. That's also on the sellers to prove that the products are authentic.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
We vet the sellers up front. The good thing is like, it's you have to apply to go live on Whatnot, and we have a huge trust and safety team that we continue to like invest in. And so if you are caught, selling fake goods, like, we will catch that immediately, and then your access will be removed. And so there's a huge cost of like selling a fake product. And we talked a lot about our algorithm, and we also have ratings and review systems, and it's just like anything else. Like, it's the big sellers care deeply about what those systems say. And so any risk to that is very like transparent and upfront in the purchasing experience.
So you have a lot of momentum right now. What's next for Whatnot this year and into the coming years?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's probably maybe a bit of a boring answer, but I think it's a lot of the same as what we've been doing. I think we've always been hyper focused on trying to solve these very specific problems for the specific communities that are on the platform. It's how we organize our team. We have GMs of each of these categories to make sure that we're really going deep, and as things evolve, we're like really holding up our end of the bargain to provide a great experience for the communities. And so I think for us, it's like going deeper. How do we get more selection in those categories? Like, if you are a vintage t-shirt buyer, can you buy all sorts of vintage t-shirts that you want? If you're a luxury handbag buyer, we have all of those brands for you. And so it's like, how do we just continue to increase the selection? I think we've been able to build a really big business, but I think we're very much like scratching the surface on a lot of these categories. And so I think there's a ton of room to growth of just like more selection, lots more categories. We're going to launch into a couple more countries. And so we'll continue to just like increase the selection, and really we'll also just continue to push them on the marketing side. Like, we did a big campaign with Mr. Beast on Super Bowl. We ended up being the third, top 3 app in the App Store on like Super Bowl weekend, when there's like gambling apps and everything else that we were ahead of. And so we'll continue to like market. I think we're at a point where we think that pretty much anyone can download Whatnot and really get like utility and value from it. And so we'll start to be a bit louder and start to yell from the treetops like Gary Vee about live shopping.
Awesome. So before we let you go, we have our last kind of mixtape section, which is just fun, more lighthearted questions. The first one is, what was the first thing that you ever bought on Whatnot?
I bought it was a sports card. This was a big time, I don't know if you're a basketball fan, but John Morant was like the hot NBA player at the time. And so the first thing I bought was like a John Morant PSA graded sports card.
I'm sure that will mean something to some of our listeners. It doesn't, I don't know. I don't understand, but.
Yeah. The problem is, I mean, I've always been a sports fan, but
yeah.
I've like the stuff I now have, the random stuff in my apartment that I collected from Whatnot is like a very slippery slope. And so I found myself into all sorts of different hobbies and communities that I did not know anything about either.
That's what I was thinking as you were talking. I was like, this sounds really dangerous. I'm not sure I should let myself.
Yeah. No, it's fun. I mean, our sellers are amazing and they have such unique products and they'll tell you the story behind it. And like one time, you're in the stream, you're like, I didn't know I needed that. But now I just
Yeah.
heard why this is so special. Maybe I do need to buy this right now.
Yeah, dangerous. So before Whatnot, you spent years in the world of podcasting at Spotify and Anchor. I'm curious if you think there's anything that podcasters like myself could learn from live sellers, or maybe vice versa. Like, are there any shared tips across those two categories of, I guess, performers you could call us?
Yeah, I would say that what podcasters can learn from like Whatnot sellers would be a lot of the magic of Whatnot is the authenticity. And so you'll see really highly produced streams that have like multiple camera angles and things like that. But most of what you see on Whatnot is just like someone going live from with their cell phone, and it's more about like the passion and the products for doing the speaking versus anything else. And a lot of my time trying to help people create podcasts, I think the biggest pain point or like the biggest sticking gap is always like, I want this to be perfect. Like everything has to be perfect, and I need the recording studio and I need this. And it's like, you really don't. You just need really good content and conversation. So I think I'd love to get podcasters. Maybe I've changed. I mean, I've been out of the game, but that would be the thing I was always pushing on creators when I was in the podcast biz. And then on the flip side, I think what successful podcasters know is that like consistency is really key. And I think it's very similar on the Whatnot side. And so you can kind of think of like a Whatnot channel as like a digital storefront. And so if you have a brick and mortar store and no one knows when you're going to be open, maybe open on Monday, maybe you'll be open on Wednesday. Like it's really hard to show up there. Whereas like the best streamers are very consistent when they show up and very consistent like the product and selection that they provide.
So now, growing up, your family had a barbecue restaurant. Is that right?
Yes, that's what you did your research.
I did. And I love those fun little things like that. So what's one lesson from that world? It could be from the world of actual like barbecue or just like running a restaurant that you've applied to your own career.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's like a throughput there. Let's see if I can frame it correctly. I think you just like can't skip like the hard work always like kind of like shines through. And so the reason I say that with barbecue, one, my dad was character. If you knew him, I'm gonna say he was definitely pushing a lot. But like barbecue is just like kind of this product of love. Like most people don't really appreciate that. Like if you're buying like a great slab of ribs, what happens before it gets to your plate is that someone has peeled the membrane off, they've rubbed them, they've thrown them in the smoker, maybe they've taken them out a couple times along the way and mopped them down with like barbecue sauce. And so like it's this like 6-hour extravaganza. If your brisket's like an 18-hour experience in some places. And so like it takes a lot to have like the end product. And so I would say like a lot of the small stuff, a lot of the details that go into it, I think really shine through in like the very end, like the end product. And so I think in my career, it's been similar, just trying to like focus on the small things and really putting in the effort. And I think that the output generally follows.
Yeah, that's such good advice. Like you can't skip those preparation steps. You really can't.
100%.
One other thing that I dug up that you said is that Tokyo is the one place that you never want to leave. Is that one true? You can never know on the internet. Okay, so tell me, what is one thing that you think then that Japanese retail does better than anyone else? And if you want to expound about why you love Tokyo too, that's totally fine.
No, it's honestly retail is like one of the reasons is probably the number one reason why I love Tokyo the most. Like you can just go to a neighborhood and get fully lost. Like there's a couple like vintage neighborhoods like Shimokitazawa that like you can just walk around the streets, and everyone you walk, it feels honestly very analogous to like how I talk about like Whatnot sellers. It's not like someone just like saw a business opportunity and wanted to open up like a vintage store. It's like these people are so passionate about what they're selling and they're going to dedicate like their full career to doing it. It's like there's obviously this culture in Japan around like mastery and doing things 10, 20, 100,000 hours and being like great at it. They're just obsessed. And so I think that really shines through in the end product. Like people are so obsessed with what they're selling and their products and making the retail space perfect. And they're so friendly, and it's just the best. It's the best. I would say I want to go to Tokyo now.
I mean,
now I'm talking myself into booking a trip.
Going back again. I mean, you're talking me into trying to visit. I've never been.
Oh, you got to go. I have a Google Maps list of like 200 places I'll send you. It'll be overwhelming, but it'll be great.
Fantastic. All right, Armand, thank you for joining joining us today and taking us inside the exciting world of Whatnot and barbecue and many other things. It's been really fun having you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me, Nicole. It's a blast.
And thanks to all of you for joining us. We'd love to continue the conversation on LinkedIn on the Retail Touchpoints page. So stop by and tell us about your own live shopping experiences or drop any other thoughts on everything we covered today with Armand. Thanks, everybody. Talk to y'all soon. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Retail Remix. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app. Until next time, keep mixing it up.